Brep, the sound froze everyone in Chase Bank's lobby. Jessica Reynolds held up the torn pieces of an 847er disability check, smirking at the woman across the counter. Nice try, but we don't cash fake checks here, Jessica announced, her voice echoing off marble walls. 12 customers turned to stare. 3 pulled out phones. Sarah Martinez didn't flinch. The 34-year-old veteran had survived worse than public humiliation. Her weathered leather briefcase sat beside her completely still. Her prosthetic leg ached from standing, but her military posture never wavered. "Ma'am, you need to leave," Jessica continued, enjoying her audience. "Before I call security." What Jessica didn't know was that Sarah owned something far more valuable than that torn check. Something that would turn this bank upside down in exactly 13 minutes. Life stories like this, real life stories that become touching stories. These black stories of quiet power happen when you least expect them. Have you ever watched someone underestimate the wrong person? The digital clock above the teller windows read 11:47 a.m. Sarah Martinez had exactly 13 minutes before the most important phone call of her career. 13 minutes to complete what should have been a 2-minute transaction. Jessica Reynolds arranged the torn check pieces like a prosecutor displaying evidence. Her acrylic nails, painted seafoam green, tapped against the marble counter in a rhythm that screamed for attention. At 22, Jessica had discovered that a little authority could make her feel powerful in ways her community college business degree had never had. "Marcus, come look at this," Jessica called to her colleague, her voice pitched for maximum audience impact. "Handwritten numbers, no security watermarks. The paper stock is all wrong." She held up a fragment for the growing crowd. "This is exactly what they showed us in fraud training." Sarah's military training had taught her to assess threats quickly. Jessica wasn't just incompetent, she was dangerous. The kind of person who confused cruelty with competence, who needed to diminish others to feel significant. Sarah had known soldiers like this. They usually didn't last long in combat zones. "Miss, I'm going to need 2 forms of government-issued photo ID," Jessica announced, loud enough for the lobby's dozen customers to hear clearly. "A utility bill dated within 30 days, and a credit report." "I provided my driver's license and military identification," Sarah replied, her voice carrying the steady cadence of someone who'd briefed generals. "Department of Defense Regulation 1000.1 establishes military ID as primary federal identification." Jessica's eyes narrowed. Smart customers were the worst kind. "Military ID? Please, you can buy those on eBay for $20. I watch YouTube videos about stolen valor cases." The accusation hit the lobby like a physical blow. A woman in yoga clothes stopped mid-text to stare. The teenager with her mother whispered something behind her hand. An elderly man shook his head, though whether in disgust at Jessica's behavior or Sarah's alleged deception remained unclear. Sarah's briefcase sat beside her on the counter. Weathered Italian leather that had cost more than Jessica's monthly salary. The brass corners were polished to mirror brightness. A first-class boarding pass from yesterday's flight to Washington, D.C. protruded slightly from the side pocket. But Jessica's attention remained fixed on what she perceived as weakness, not the subtle indicators of power. "Ma'am, you need to step aside," Jessica continued, gesturing dramatically. "Other customers are waiting." Behind Sarah, exactly 2 people stood in line. Neither seemed impatient. But facts had never limited Jessica's theatrical instincts. The lobby buzzed with phone activity. A woman live-streamed to her Instagram followers. "Y'all, this bank drama is insane right now. This teller is absolutely destroying this customer." Within minutes, #Chase Bank was trending locally. Sarah reached into her briefcase with practiced precision. She withdrew a business card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering, the kind that cost $3 each to print. She placed it face down on the counter. "Perhaps I could speak with your manager about your customer service protocols." Jessica didn't hesitate. She picked up the card and tore it cleanly in half without reading it. The gesture drew audible gasps from several customers. "I don't need to see your fake business cards," Jessica declared triumphantly. "That's classic scammer behavior. Create fake credentials, then demand to speak to authority figures when caught." The manager's office door opened with the soft hiss of hydraulic hinges. Tom Rivers emerged, drawn by the commotion like a moth to flame. 20 years in banking had taught Tom to identify problems quickly and resolve them quietly. This situation was becoming neither quick nor quiet. "What's the issue here?" Tom asked, though his body language suggested he'd already chosen sides. "Attempted check fraud," Jessica explained, indicating the torn pieces. "Fake military credentials. Threatening behavior when confronted with evidence." Sarah turned to face Tom, her movement controlled despite the prosthetic leg that made standing painful. 3 years earlier, an IED outside Kandahar had taken at her right leg below the knee. She'd learned to walk again in Walter Reed's rehabilitation wing, surrounded by Marines who'd lost more and complained less. "I presented valid identification for a routine transaction," Sarah said. "Your employee destroyed both my check and my identification without examination." Tom studied Sarah's appearance: jeans, plain sweater, practical shoes. She looked like someone who counted every dollar, possibly someone living check to check. The kind of customer who generated paperwork when mishandled but rarely generated profit. "Ma'am, our tellers receive extensive fraud training," Tom explained in his practiced customer service tone. "If there's been a legitimate mistake, you are welcome to return with additional documentation from your issuing bank." "This is my issuing bank," Sarah replied quietly. "I've maintained multiple accounts here for 3 years." Jessica snorted audibly. "Right, that's what they all say." Something shifted in Sarah's expression. Not anger, calculation. She glanced at her phone. 11:52 a.m. 11 minutes remaining before her conference call with the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. 11 minutes before her carefully orchestrated plan reached its crescendo. "I'd like to speak with your regional director," Sarah said calmly. Tom's patience evaporated. Regional directors didn't involve themselves in routine customer disputes. Suggesting otherwise was either ignorance or intimidation. "Ma'am, I'm the highest authority at this branch. I'm asking you politely to leave before we call security." The threat crystallized the power dynamic perfectly. Sarah, apparently desperate and possibly homeless, versus institutional authority backed by corporate policy. The filming customers sensed they were documenting something significant, though none could predict what would unfold. Sarah's phone buzzed, another call from an unknown number, the fourth in 6 minutes. She declined it without looking. 10 more minutes, she murmured, checking her watch. 10 minutes for what? Jessica demanded, her voice rising. Are you making threats now? I'm simply noting, Sarah replied with absolute calm, that patience has natural limits. The torn check pieces lay scattered across Jessica's workspace like evidence of a crime not yet committed. But Sarah knew something Jessica didn't. Sometimes the smallest actions trigger the largest consequences. Her phone buzzed again. This time she glanced at the caller ID. Martinez Financial Legal Department. Right on schedule. The atmosphere in Chase Bank's lobby shifted like air pressure before a storm. Sarah's phone continued buzzing with calls from unknown numbers, each declined ring adding weight to the growing tension. The digital clock now read 11:53 a.m., 10 minutes remaining. Tom Rivers motioned toward the security desk where Officer James Patterson sat monitoring the lobby cameras. Patterson, a retired NYPD detective working private security, had seen enough workplace drama to recognize when situations spiraled beyond normal customer complaints. He stood slowly, his hand instinctively checking his radio. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one final time to leave voluntarily, Tom announced, his voice carrying across the marble lobby. Otherwise, we'll be forced to involve law enforcement. Jessica practically vibrated with vindication. She'd never had a manager support her so completely, and the power rush was intoxicating. Should I call 911? She asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. Document everything for the police report? That won't be necessary, Tom replied, though his tone suggested it might be soon. Officer Patterson can handle this internally. Patterson approached with practiced authority, his security uniform crisp and professional. 25 years on the force had taught him to read situations quickly, but something about this scene felt off. The alleged troublemaker stood perfectly still, her posture military straight, hands visible and relaxed. She didn't display the typical signs of someone about to cause problems. Ma'am, I'm Officer Patterson. I understand there's been some confusion about a transaction? Sarah turned to face him, and Patterson immediately recognized a fellow veteran. The way she shifted weight off her right leg, the controlled breathing, the calm eyes that had seen worse than bank lobbies, all familiar signals. Officer Patterson, I attempted to cash a legitimate disability check. When your teller destroyed it without examination, I requested to speak with a manager. Now I'm being threatened with arrest for requesting proper customer service. Patterson glanced at the torn check pieces scattered across Jessica's station. His detective instincts kicked in automatically. Miss, can you explain why you destroyed the customer's check before verifying its authenticity? Jessica's confidence wavered slightly. It was obviously fake. The paper quality, the handwriting, everything about it screamed fraud. Did you run it through your verification system? Patterson asked. I didn't need to, Jessica replied defensively. I can spot fakes from experience. Patterson nodded slowly. In his experience, people who claimed they could spot fakes usually couldn't spot anything except their own prejudices. But he kept that observation to himself. Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time she glanced at the screen. Martinez Financial, board chair. She declined the call, but not before Patterson noticed her slight smile. Something about that smile bothered him, though he couldn't identify why. The lobby crowd had grown to nearly 20 people, most filming discreetly. The woman live streaming had gained 47 viewers who were commenting in real time. Call the news. This is discrimination. That teller is wild. Wait till this goes viral. Marcus, Jessica's colleague, watched the situation unfold with growing unease. He'd processed disability checks before. They came from a secured federal printing facility in Austin, with specific paper stock and security features. From what he could see of the torn pieces, this check looked legitimate. Jess, he whispered, maybe we should... Don't second-guess me, Jessica hissed back. I know what I'm doing. But Marcus wasn't convinced. He'd watched Jessica deny legitimate transactions before when customers didn't meet her unspoken standards of worthiness. It was becoming a problem. Sarah checked her watch, 11:55 a.m., 8 minutes remaining. Her phone had stopped buzzing, but she could feel the weight of what was coming. 23 years of careful planning had led to this moment, and she wouldn't let a bank teller's prejudice derail everything. Officer Patterson, Sarah said calmly, I have a conference call in 8 minutes that requires my immediate attention. Can we resolve this quickly? What kind of conference call? Tom interjected suspiciously. Sounds pretty important for someone cashing disability checks. The comment revealed Tom's complete misunderstanding of the situation, and Sarah decided the time for subtle hints had passed. She reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thick folder marked "Confidential" in red letters. The kind that determines whether this bank continues operating in its current capacity, Sarah replied quietly. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Jessica laughed, actually laughed out loud. Oh, please, Jessica said, her voice dripping contempt. Now you're threatening to shut down Chase Bank? What's next? You're secretly the FBI? But Patterson wasn't laughing. Something about Sarah's demeanor, her word choices, the expensive briefcase, the way she carried herself, it all suggested someone with real authority, real power. Ma'am, could you clarify what you mean by that statement? Patterson asked professionally. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang again. This time she answered. Martinez speaking, she said simply. The lobby fell silent. Even Jessica stopped talking to listen. Yes, I'm aware of the timeline, Sarah continued, her voice carrying easily across the space. The board is waiting? Good. Tell them we'll proceed as scheduled. She paused, listening. No, there's been no change in our position. The acquisition finalizes at noon regardless of local complications. Another pause. Understood. I'll be available in 5 minutes. Sarah ended the call and looked directly at Tom. I believe you have approximately 5 minutes to reconsider your customer service approach. The word acquisition echoed through the lobby like a gunshot. Several customers exchanged glances. The live streaming woman's viewer count had jumped to over 200. Tom felt the first flutter of genuine concern. Ma'am, I don't know what kind of game you're playing. This isn't a game, Sarah interrupted, her military bearing suddenly unmistakable. This is business, and you've just made it personal. She opened her folder and withdrew a document bearing the official seal of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Patterson caught a glimpse of dense legal text and multiple signatures. "Officer Patterson, you seem like a reasonable man," Sarah said. "In your professional opinion, how long does corporate news typically take to travel from a local branch to regional headquarters?" Patterson considered the question. "In a crisis, maybe 10 minutes through proper channels. Less if someone makes direct calls." "Excellent assessment," Sarah replied. She checked her watch again. 11:57 a.m. "Mr. Rivers, I suggest you contact your regional director immediately. Tell Patricia Wells that Sarah Martinez is requesting her personal attention." Tom's face went pale. Patricia Wells was the regional director for the entire tri-state area. Customers didn't request her personal attention. They didn't even know her name. "How do you know Patricia's name?" Tom asked weakly. Sarah smiled for the first time since entering the bank. It wasn't a warm smile. "Because," she said quietly, "as of noon today, Patricia Wells reports directly to me." The lobby erupted in whispers. Jessica's confidence cracked visibly. Marcus stepped away from his teller window, suddenly wanting distance from the situation. Patterson's radio crackled with incoming calls. Apparently, the live stream had attracted attention from local news stations. 3 more security officers appeared at the lobby entrance. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and nodded slightly. 3 minutes, she announced to no one in particular. The countdown had begun in earnest. 11:58 a.m. 2 minutes remaining. Sarah Martinez opened her briefcase with the precision of someone who had performed this action countless times before. The lobby fell silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant murmur of live stream commentary. 23 people now watched directly, while over 400 followed online. Tom Rivers stood frozen behind Jessica's teller station, his phone halfway to his ear. He'd been about to call Patricia Wells, but something in Sarah's demeanor suggested the conversation might not go as he expected. "Officer Patterson," Sarah said calmly, withdrawing a thick document bound in blue legal covers. "In your experience, how long does it typically take to process a corporate acquisition worth $2.8 billion? Patterson's eyebrows rose. $2.8 billion, that's serious money. "It is indeed." Sarah placed the document on the counter, her movements deliberate and controlled. "The paperwork has been in process for 14 months. Due diligence completed. Regulatory approvals obtained. Federal Reserve clearance granted as of 9 a.m. this morning." Jessica laughed nervously. "This is insane. You're pretending to buy Chase Bank? Do you know how crazy you sound?" But Marcus had moved closer to read the document header. His face went white. "Jess," he whispered urgently, "you need to see this." The document bore the official seal of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. The title page read, "Acquisition Agreement, Martinez Financial Group LLC, Acquisition of Chase Bank NA, Branch Network Northeast Division." Sarah's phone rang. She answered without hesitation. "Martinez Financial, this is Sarah," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to taking important calls. "Yes, we're still on schedule for noon execution." The lobby listened in stunned silence. "The Federal Reserve confirmed final clearance at 11:45? Excellent. And the Justice Department has no additional objections? Perfect." She paused, checking her watch. 1 minute, 30 seconds until market close of the tender offer. All shareholders have been notified? Good. Initiate the transfer protocols. Tom Rivers felt his world tilting sideways. Corporate acquisitions didn't happen in bank lobbies. They happened in boardrooms with teams of lawyers and months of negotiations. This had to be some elaborate scam, but the document looked legitimate. The seals appeared authentic, and Sarah's phone calls had the ring of actual business communications, not theatrical performance. "Ma'am," Tom said weakly, "even if this is real, you can't just acquire a bank because you're unhappy with customer service." Sarah ended her call and looked at Tom with something approaching pity. "Mr. Rivers, you fundamentally misunderstand the situation. This acquisition has been planned for over a year. The disability check was never about money." She opened the blue document to reveal pages of dense legal text, financial statements, and regulatory approvals. Patterson leaned closer and saw signatures from officials he recognized from news coverage of major banking decisions. "Then what was it about?" Patterson asked. his detective instincts fully engaged. Principal, Sarah replied simply, and a final test of institutional culture before assuming operational control. The digital clock hit 11:59 a.m. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled. Not the cold smile from earlier, but something warmer and more satisfied. Transfer complete, she announced to the lobby. As of 30 seconds ago, Martinez Financial Group officially owns controlling interest in Chase Bank's Northeast Division. That includes this branch, Mr. Rivers' employment contract, and Miss Reynolds' position. Jessica's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. That's impossible. You can't just buy a bank. Actually, Sarah said, pulling out a tablet and swiping to a financial news app, you can. It's called a hostile takeover, and it's perfectly legal when you have sufficient capital and regulatory approval. She turned the tablet screen toward the group. The headline on MarketWatch read, Breaking Martinez Financial Completes 2.8 billion Acquisition of Chase Northeast Division. The timestamp showed 11:59:47 a.m. Marcus grabbed his colleague's arm. Jess, she actually did it. She bought the bank. But Sarah wasn't finished. She withdrew another document from her briefcase. This one bearing the letterhead of a law firm Patterson recognized as one of the most expensive in Manhattan. This, Sarah said, placing it on the counter, is a discrimination lawsuit filed against this branch at 11:30 a.m. this morning, approximately 17 minutes after Miss Reynolds destroyed my check. Tom's knees nearly buckled. A lawsuit? Filed this morning? Federal Court, Southern District of New York. Violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Service Members Civil Relief Act, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Damages sought, $847 million. The number wasn't random. It matched the exact dollar amount of the destroyed disability check, multiplied by 1 million. Jessica finally found her voice. This is insane. You cannot sue for almost $1 billion over a torn check. The check was worth $847, Sarah agreed calmly. The discriminatory behavior against a disabled veteran, filmed and live-streamed to hundreds of witnesses, documented by multiple security cameras, and perpetrated by employees of a federally regulated financial institution? She paused. That has significantly higher value. Officer Patterson had seen enough courtroom drama during his police career to recognize legitimate legal strategy. Ma'am, assuming this is all real, why the elaborate setup? Why not just identify yourself from the beginning? Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. Officer Patterson, imagine you're considering acquiring a company. Wouldn't you want to understand its true culture? See how employees treat customers when they think no one important is watching? The logic was undeniable. Patterson nodded slowly. I've been planning this acquisition for 14 months, Sarah continued. Due diligence revealed concerning patterns in customer complaints, particularly involving veterans, minorities, and economically disadvantaged individuals. Today was designed to test whether those patterns reflected systemic problems or isolated incidents. She gestured toward Jessica, who stood speechless behind her teller window. Miss Reynolds just provided definitive evidence of systemic cultural failure. Tom Rivers fumbled for his phone. I need to call Patricia Wells immediately. Please do, Sarah said pleasantly. Though I should mention that Ms. Wells is currently in an emergency board meeting with Martinez financial executives. Her employment status is under review. The live stream viewer count had exploded to over 2,000. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. 3 local news vans had arrived in the parking lot, their crews setting up equipment for live broadcasts. Sarah's phone rang again. This time she put it on speaker. Sarah, this is David Chen, your legal counsel. The acquisition is complete, the lawsuit is filed, and media response is already significant. How do you want to proceed with immediate personnel decisions? The lobby listened in fascination as Sarah considered the question. Immediate termination for Miss Reynolds, effective today. Suspension pending investigation for Mr. Rivers. And I want a complete audit of customer complaints for the past 24 months, with particular attention to patterns of discriminatory behavior. Understood. The board is standing by for your call. I'll be available in 5 minutes, Sarah replied, ending the call. She turned to address the entire lobby, her voice carrying easily across the marble space. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption to your banking experience. Effective immediately, this branch will implement new customer service protocols designed to ensure every customer receives respectful, professional treatment regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived economic status. The crowd murmured approval. Several people actually applauded. Jessica stared at Sarah with something approaching shock. "You're actually firing me? Over one mistake?" "Miss Reynolds," Sarah replied quietly, "destroying a customer's legal documents without verification isn't a mistake. It's misconduct. Mocking a disabled veteran isn't poor judgment. It's discrimination. And doing both while being filmed demonstrates a fundamental inability to represent this institution professionally." She paused, her military bearing evident in every word. "You're terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises." Tom Rivers watched his career implode in real time. 20 years of careful advancement, destroyed by one discriminatory employee and his failure to manage her properly. "Ms. Martinez," he said desperately, "surely we can discuss this situation rationally. Miss Reynolds is young, she can be retrained." "Mr. Rivers," Sarah interrupted, "you threatened to have a disabled veteran arrested for requesting proper customer service. You supported an employee who destroyed legal documents without examination. You demonstrated exactly the kind of institutional bias that prompted this acquisition." She collected her documents and placed them back in her briefcase. "Your employment status will be determined after a complete review of your management decisions and complaint handling over the past 3 years. Until then, you're suspended without pay." The digital clock hit 12 p.m. exactly. Sarah's phone immediately began ringing with calls from financial news outlets, regulatory agencies, and corporate executives. The Martinez financial acquisition had officially commenced, and the entire banking industry was scrambling to understand its implications. But in Chase Bank's marble lobby, the transformation had already begun. The mahogany-paneled boardroom on the 47th floor of Chase Tower buzzed with controlled panic. 12 executives sat around a conference table that had witnessed countless strategic decisions, but none quite like this. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled below like a financial kingdom, a kingdom that had just experienced a seismic shift in power. Patricia Wells, regional director for Chase Northeast Division, stared at her phone in disbelief. The caller ID showed Martinez Financial Legal, and she'd been avoiding the call for 8 minutes. 8 minutes that felt like 8 hours. "Patricia," said Robert DeHaze, Chase's executive vice president, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. "You need to take that call, now." Patricia's hands trembled slightly as she answered. "Patricia Wells speaking." "Ms. Wells, this is David Chen, General Counsel for Martinez Financial Group. Ms. Martinez will join this conversation in 60 seconds. I suggest you activate your boardroom's conference system and prepare for a comprehensive discussion of your branch's operational failures." The line went quiet except for hold music, ironically, a classical arrangement that sounded like a funeral march. Robert Hayes loosened his tie, a gesture that would have been unthinkable during normal board meetings. "Gentlemen, ladies, let's review what we know. Martinez Financial Group has acquired controlling interest in our Northeast Division through a perfectly legal, hostile takeover. The acquisition papers were filed with regulators 14 months ago. We missed it completely." Margaret Foster, Chief Risk Officer, consulted her tablet with trembling fingers. The due diligence was flawless. They identified every vulnerability in our customer service protocols, every pattern of discriminatory complaints, every regulatory soft spot. This wasn't impulsive. This was surgical. Through the boardroom speakers, hold music stopped. A voice emerged, calm, professional, and absolutely lethal in its precision. "Good afternoon, this is Sarah Martinez." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Ms. Martinez," Robert Hayes began, his voice carefully modulated for damage control, "I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding at one of our branches. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation for any inconvenience." "Mr. Hayes," Sarah interrupted smoothly, "let me clarify something immediately. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a systematic test of institutional culture, and your organization failed catastrophically." Patricia Wells found her voice. Ms. Martinez, surely we can resolve this situation without such drastic measures. One employee's poor judgment doesn't reflect our entire corporate culture. Sarah's laugh carried no warmth. Ms. Wells, your one employee destroyed a disabled veteran's legal documents on camera while mocking her military service. Your branch manager supported this behavior and threatened arrest. And you've been regional director during a period when veterans' complaints increased 340% in your territory. The number hit the room like a physical blow. Patricia hadn't known anyone was tracking those statistics with such precision. That's, Patricia stammered, those numbers aren't. How do you have access to internal complaint data? Ms. Wells, I've had access to your internal systems for 6 months. The same consultants you hired to improve efficiency were reporting directly to my acquisition team. Every email, every policy decision, every customer complaint, we've documented everything. Margaret Foster's face went ashen. The efficiency consultants had been her recommendation. She'd essentially handed Martinez Financial the keys to their entire operation. Sarah continued with relentless precision. Your Northeast Division processed 847,000 customer transactions last quarter. Revenue, $29.1 billion. Net profit margin, 23.7%. Customer satisfaction rating, 31% among veterans, 28% among minority customers, 19% among customers with visible disabilities. The executives exchanged horrified glances. Those weren't numbers they'd seen in any internal reports. Where the hell did those statistics come from? Robert demanded. Independent customer surveys conducted over the past 8 months, Sarah replied calmly. Martinez Financial believes in data-driven decision-making. Your internal satisfaction surveys showed 89% customer approval. Our independent surveys revealed the truth. Systematic discrimination disguised by manipulated metrics. David Chen's voice joined the call. Ladies and gentlemen, you're now facing a federal discrimination lawsuit seeking $847 million in damages. The case is backed by over 400 hours of security footage, 127 documented customer complaints, and today's incident, which was live-streamed to over 3,000 viewers. Robert Hayes felt sweat gathering at his collar. Mr. Chen, surely we can negotiate a settlement that avoids litigation. Chase has significant resources for addressing customer concerns. Mr. Hayes, Sarah interrupted, your resources are now my resources. As majority shareholder, I'm less interested in settlements than in solutions. The statement hung in the boardroom air like a sword over their careers. What kind of solutions? Patricia asked weakly. Sarah's response came with military precision. Complete restructuring of customer service protocols. Mandatory 80-hour sensitivity training for all customer-facing staff. Veterans preference hiring for 25% of all new positions. Installation of AI monitoring systems to flag potential discriminatory interactions. And personal accountability measures for management who enable discriminatory behavior. Margaret Foster consulted her financial projections frantically. The cost of implementing those changes across our entire Northeast network would be approximately $340 million over 2 years. Ms. Foster, the cost of defending an $847 million discrimination lawsuit while dealing with regulatory investigations, media scrutiny, and customer boycotts would be significantly higher. This is a business decision, not a charity request. Robert Hayes recognized checkmate when he saw it. Ms. Martinez, assuming we agree to these extensive changes, what happens to current management? Excellent question, Mr. Hayes. Ms. Wells will be terminated immediately for failure to address systematic discrimination in her territory. Branch Manager Rivers is suspended pending investigation. Teller Reynolds was terminated this afternoon for cause. Patricia Wells felt her world collapse. You can't just fire me. I have employment contracts, severance agreements. Ms. Wells, David Chen interjected, your employment contract includes termination clauses for failure to maintain regulatory compliance. Systematic discrimination violations fall clearly under that provision. Security is waiting to escort you from the building. The boardroom door opened, and 2 corporate security officers entered. Patricia stared at them in disbelief before gathering her purse and walking out with whatever dignity remained. Sarah's voice continued through the speakers, now addressing the remaining executives. Gentlemen, ladies, let me be absolutely clear about our new operational philosophy. Martinez Financial Grow built its reputation serving underserved communities, veterans, immigrants, small business owners who traditional banks consider unprofitable. We don't discriminate. We don't tolerate discrimination. And we don't employ people who consider basic human dignity optional. Robert Hayes found himself in the surreal position of negotiating with his new boss. Ms. Martinez, your vision is admirable, but implementing such extensive changes while maintaining profitability will be challenging. Mr. Hayes, Martinez Financial's customer satisfaction ratings average 94% across all demographics. Our default rates are 40% lower than industry standards. Our employee retention is 89%. Turns out that treating people with respect is actually good business. Margaret Foster scrolled through Martinez Financial's public financial reports on her tablet. The numbers were undeniable. Higher customer satisfaction, lower operational costs, better regulatory ratings, superior employee retention. These metrics are impressive, Chua admitted. But how do you maintain such performance at scale? Technology, training, and accountability, Sarah replied. Every customer interaction is monitored by AI that flags potential bias. Every employee receives quarterly sensitivity training. Every manager's performance evaluation includes diversity and inclusion metrics. And every executive's compensation is tied directly to customer satisfaction across all demographic groups. The solution was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its implications for executives accustomed to managing through intimidation rather than inspiration. What happens to those of us who remain? Robert asked. You'll implement the changes I've outlined, meet the performance standards I've established, and help build a banking culture that serves all customers with equal respect. Or you'll find employment elsewhere. Sarah paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the boardroom. The choice is yours, gentlemen, but the changes begin tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. sharp. The call ended, leaving 12 executives staring at each other across a conference table that no longer represented their corporate kingdom. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its relentless pace, unaware that the banking industry had just experienced a revolution disguised as customer service. In Chase Bank's lobby, customers were already noticing differences. The new staff wore name tags that included pronouns and spoke multiple languages. Signs posted in 6 languages welcomed all customers regardless of background or financial status. Change, it seemed, could happen much faster than anyone had imagined. 3 weeks later, the transformation of Chase Bank's Northeast Division had become a case study taught at Wharton Business School. Sarah Martinez stood in the same marble lobby where Jessica Reynolds had torn her disability check, but the space felt completely different. Where tension once crackled, there was now genuine warmth. Marcus Chen, Jessica's former colleague who had tried to stop the discrimination, now wore a golden name tag reading Senior Customer Advocate. His desk faced the lobby entrance, positioned strategically to greet every customer personally. When an elderly veteran in a wheelchair approached his window, Marcus stood immediately and walked around to assist him at eye level. "Good morning, Mr. Patterson," Marcus said warmly. "How can we serve you today?" The contrast with Jessica's treatment 3 weeks earlier couldn't have been more stark. Behind the teller line, new faces reflected the community's diversity. Maria Gonzalez, a bilingual customer service specialist, helped a nervous young mother complete her first business account application in Spanish. David Kim, a former Marine who'd lost his left arm in Afghanistan, processed disability checks with the patience of someone who understood the struggle behind every transaction. The changes went far deeper than staffing. Digital monitors throughout the lobby displayed customer rights in 6 languages. A dedicated veteran services desk offered specialized financial counseling. Wheelchair-accessible workstations ensured every customer could conduct business with dignity. Sarah observed from the manager's office, Tom Rivers' former domain, now transformed into a customer advocacy center. Through glass walls, she watched interactions that would have been impossible under the previous regime. Her tablet displayed real-time metrics that told the story of transformation. Customer satisfaction, 91%, up from 31% among veterans. Complaint resolution time, 24 hours, down from 14 days. Staff retention, 97%, up from 68%. New account openings, up 340% in 3 weeks. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real change was cultural, psychological, fundamental. Amanda Foster, the organizational psychologist Sarah had hired to oversee the transition, entered the office with her weekly report. Sarah, the staff interviews are remarkable. People are genuinely excited to come to work. They feel like they're making a difference instead of just processing transactions. Sarah nodded, watching Marcus help an elderly woman understand her investment options with infinite patience. Fear-based management creates fear-based customer service. When employees feel valued, they value customers. Through the lobby windows, Sarah spotted a familiar figure approaching the entrance. Officer James Patterson, the security guard who'd witnessed Jessica's behavior, now worked part-time for Martinez Financial as a customer safety coordinator. His role had evolved from enforcing exclusion to ensuring inclusion. Patterson entered the office with a smile that would have been unimaginable 3 weeks earlier. "Sarah, you need to see this." He handed her a tablet displaying the branch's online reviews. The transformation was stunning. "First time I felt welcome at a bank as a veteran. Staff actually thanked me for my service. And meant it. My teenage daughter, who uses a wheelchair, said this was the first bank where nobody stared or spoke down to her. Finally, a bank that treats working-class customers like human beings." But the review that caught Sarah's attention came from an unexpected source. "I was Jessica Reynolds' supervisor before she was terminated. I thought the changes here would be superficial corporate PR. I was wrong. This place has been transformed from the inside out. I wish I'd had the courage to address the problems when I had the chance." Former Chase employee, Sarah smiled at the honesty. Transformation required acknowledging past failures, not just implementing future solutions. Butter Foster consulted her research notes. "The ripple effects are fascinating. 7 other Chase branches have requested similar overhauls. 3 competing banks have contacted us about consulting services. The model is spreading faster than anyone anticipated." The success attracted attention beyond banking. Harvard Business School had requested a case study. The Department of Veterans Affairs wanted to establish similar protocols at VA hospitals. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission was studying the AI monitoring system for potential federal implementation. But Sarah's greatest satisfaction came from smaller victories, like watching Marcus train new employees with the same patience he'd shown that elderly veteran, or seeing David Kim mentor young veterans transitioning to civilian careers, or reading letters from customers who felt respected for the first time in their banking relationships. Her phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wells, the former regional director. "Saw the news coverage of your branch transformation. You were right about everything. I should have listened years ago. Congratulations on proving that businesses can succeed by doing the right thing." Sarah set the phone aside without responding. Transformation wasn't about vindication or apologies. It was about creating systems that prevented future Jessica Reynolds from destroying future customers' dignity. The disability check that had started everything hung framed on the office wall, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. The torn pieces had been carefully reassembled and mounted with a simple plaque. "Every customer deserves respect." Below it, a new company motto appeared in elegant script: "Banking built on dignity, trust, and service to all." The revolution was complete. The evolution was just beginning. Outside, the afternoon sun streamed through lobby windows, illuminating customers and staff working together in an atmosphere that proved business success and human decency weren't mutually exclusive. They were mutually reinforcing. Sarah Martinez had acquired more than a bank. She'd acquired proof that systematic change was possible, one interaction at a time. 6 months after Jessica Reynolds tore up a disabled veteran's check, the ripple effects had transformed American banking. Sarah Martinez stood on the observation deck of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Manhattan stretching endlessly below, holding a report that would reshape financial services nationwide. The Martinez model had become federal policy. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency now required all federally chartered banks to implement similar customer dignity protocols. What began with one torn check had evolved into the Banking Equality Act of 2025. But the personal transformations mattered most to Sarah. Marcus Chen had been promoted to Regional Customer Advocacy Director, overseeing sensitivity training at 47 branches. His first presentation to Chase's national board had brought several executives to tears, not from sadness, but from recognition of what they had been missing. David Kim now managed Martinez Financial's Veteran Services Division, helping thousands of former military personnel navigate civilian financial systems. His prosthetic arm bore a small American flag pin, the same one Sarah wore on her business suits. Even Officer Patterson had found new purpose. His security firm now specialized in inclusion enforcement, ensuring businesses created welcoming environments for all customers. His client list included banks, hospitals, and government offices across 3 states. Jessica Reynolds had quietly enrolled in community college, studying social work. A mutual friend reported she'd been volunteering at a veterans shelter, learning firsthand about the struggles she'd once mocked. Redemption, Sarah believed, was always possible. The torn disability check remained framed in Sarah's office, but now accompanied by thousands of thank you letters from customers who'd experienced dignity for the first time in their banking relationships. The wall had become a monument to the power of systematic change. Martinez Financial Group had grown into the nation's leading community-focused bank, with customer satisfaction ratings that made competitors study their methods obsessively. The formula wasn't complicated. Treat people with respect, hire diverse staff, eliminate discriminatory practices, measure everything, and never compromise on human dignity. But Sarah's proudest achievement was invisible. The countless discriminatory interactions that never happened because employees now understood that every customer's story mattered. The veterans who weren't mocked, the immigrants who weren't dismissed, the disabled customers who weren't pitied. 3 weeks earlier, Harvard Business School had offered Sarah an endowed chair to teach ethical leadership in financial services. She'd accepted, understanding that sharing the model mattered more than growing her empire. Her final act as CEO had been establishing the Martinez Foundation for Banking Equality, a $100 million endowment supporting customer advocacy training nationwide. The foundation's mission statement was simple: every person deserves financial services delivered with dignity, respect, and understanding. Standing on that observation deck, Sarah reflected on how touching stories like hers joined countless other real-life stories of transformation. These Black stories of triumph over institutional bias prove that individual courage could create systematic change. Life stories mattered because they reminded everyone that behind every transaction was a human being deserving respect. The revolution she'd started with a torn check had become evolution, slow, steady, permanent change that would protect future customers from future discrimination. Have you witnessed discrimination in banking, retail, or any service industry? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and your voice can create change. If this story inspired you to believe that systematic change is possible, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to know that dignity isn't negotiable. Together, we can ensure that every customer, regardless of background, receives the respect they deserve. Your story could be next.